And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, are frozen cheese pizzas generally sold in packs of 10? And with a dead sunspot explosion hurling plasma toward planet Earth, is someone up there finally about to put me out of my misery? And now, the podcast host who would never tempt fate by angering the sun or those horrible gophers, Pete Dominic!
Right indeed, my friend. I have always got something between the sun and I, either a hat or a solar panel, coming at you from the shed here on a Wednesday. It's the 13th of April. Here we are smack in the middle of April. I'm getting some great vitamin N shots from people who are taking pictures of cherry blossoms and all types of blossoms. It's a wonderful time of year. I hope you're getting outside and enjoying it as I did yesterday. It's been sunny and lovely here on the East Coast. I hope it is where you are in your neck of the woods. I've got an excellent show coming for you. Wajahat Ali is back on the program today, and Jeff Jarvis joins me as well. Great conversations with both of these guys, and I think you're going to really like them. Thanks for all the feedback on yesterday's talks and everything else. Keep the emails coming, and email me anytime, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Also, the podcast brought to you all this week by Indeed.com. If you're looking to hire somebody at your firm, go to Indeed.com/standup right now. Lots of news as always. Time to look into what happened yesterday. Time for the last 24. U.S. inflation has hit a 40-year high of 8.5% in March. The Biden administration temporarily is allowing E15 gasoline to be sold this summer to help ease gas prices, so more ethanol in your gas, I guess. I don't know how they could do that. Somebody's got to tell me about that. Putin has declared peace talks with Kyiv had reached a dead end. The U.S. ordered all non-emergency staff to leave its consulate in Shanghai, as more than 200,000 COVID-19 cases have been reported there since the start of March. The governor of Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt, signed a bill into law that makes performing an abortion a felony, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. I've got sound for you on that, and it's not pretty. And the governor of Alabama, Kay Ivey, signed legislation that makes it a felony to provide gender-affirming medical care to people under 19. Unbelievable how the government is interfering in people's health care, medical care, but that is exactly what we're seeing. New York's Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin was arrested and charged with bribery, fraud, and falsification of records while he was a state senator, in a development that rattled our state's politics. He later resigned. And, of course, a horrible shooting in New York City's subway in Brooklyn, New York, where several of the guests on this show live. So lots to talk about, although I don't really have much more to say about that shooting. It's an investigation underway. But I do want to play for you a few things before I get to the rest of the rapid-fire headlines. First, President Biden yesterday, in a speech bemoaning a spike in U.S. gas prices, referred to the unfolding genocide half a world away and said it was committed by a dictator, of course, referring to Putin. Here is a little of that sound.
Your family budget, your ability to fill up your tank, none of it should hinge on whether a dictator declares war and commits genocide half a world away. To help deal with this Putin price hike, I've authorized the release of 1 million barrels per day for the next 6 months from our Strategic Petroleum Reserve. This is by far the largest release of our national reserve in history. It's a wartime bridge to increase oil supply as we work with U.S. oil producers to ramp up their production this year.
He is really hoping that, and so am I. The Putin price hike moniker sticks because maybe that way people will stop putting stickers of him on gas stations. Did you hear about the guy that they got arrested by the police for getting caught doing that? Somebody confronted him and he went nuts, and I forget where that was. But yeah, terrible. There's President Biden yesterday The Austrian president met with Putin, by the way, and here is, through a translator, what he had to say about that meeting.
I generally have no optimistic impression that I can report to you from this conversation with President Putin. The offensive is evidently being prepared on a massive scale.
Austria is not a member of NATO, but it has imposed wide-ranging sanctions on Russia alongside other European Union member states.
All right, there you go. Now, here is the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. I saw this and thought it was interesting. Here he is talking about human rights here at home in the U.S.
The universal nature of human rights also means that we have to hold ourselves accountable to the same standards. Even as this report looks outward to countries around the world, we've acknowledged from day one of this administration that we have challenges here in the United States. We take seriously our responsibility to address these shortcomings, and we know that the way to do it matters. Together with citizens and communities, out in the open, transparently, not trying to pretend problems don't exist or sweeping them under a rug. And in fact, that's what distinguishes democracies. Our willingness, our commitment to pursue that more perfect union. And practicing what we preach at home gives us greater legitimacy when we encourage governments abroad to do the same thing.
All right, well said. That is the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. Yesterday, he was talking about the State Department's 2021 country reports on human rights and how we need to do better here at home. Yeah, tell me about it. I was at the Board of Education last night talking about civil rights and what I think are human rights when it comes to marriage equality and LGBT equality and anti-bullying initiatives that need to be adopted at our school. So certainly we have a lot of work to do right here at home. Good points, as always. All right, in a somewhat related story, there is an NBA star who is named Brittany Griner, and she's been in detention in Russia because apparently they caught her, I think, with some cannabis cartridges. And Robin Roberts was talking to the WNBA Players Association president, Nneka Ogwumike, and asked whether gender is at play in Brittany Griner's detention in Russia. And I just thought this was a great answer on a really important issue. Here it is.
A lot in the public, they say, if this were an NBA star like Brittany, that it would be daily news. Do you think a gender issue is at play here?
I mean, when is it not? You know, you advocate for us in so many respects. You know, it's disappointing that the question of, you know, it being a gender issue is top of mind now when it comes to this type of circumstance. But the reality is, you know, she's over there because of a gender issue, pay inequity. I played in Russia for 4 years. I played in Poland for 1 year. I played in China for 2 years. We go over there to supplement our incomes. And quite frankly, we go over there to maintain our game. You know, our teams encourage us to keep up with our game by going over there and being more competitive. So there's so much that's at play that, you know, we live politically, intrinsically.
Smart conversation, really important, and keeping my eye on what happens with that woman's plight in future. Now, let's talk about the future of all of the women of Oklahoma and to some extent all red states in this country now that they are all outlawing abortion all over the country. Here it is. It happened yesterday in Oklahoma where their governor, Kevin Stitt, just signed into law a near total abortion ban, making Oklahoma more like Gilead and putting Oklahoma's women, to borrow a phrase, under his eye in danger right away. And here he is. It's about a minute and a half. It's tough to take, but you need to take it because this is exactly what's happening across the country. And is it too far? We'll see.
I promised Oklahomans that I would sign every pro-life bill that hit my desk. And that's what we're doing here today. Senate Bill 612 passed with a vote of 38-9 in the Senate and 70-14 in the House. That's over 80% support in both chambers. The bill's authors, Senator Dom and Representative Olson, are here today. Thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you, Senator. You'll hear from them directly here in a few minutes. And as governor, I represent all 4 million Oklahomans, and they overwhelmingly support protecting life in the state of Oklahoma. We want Oklahoma to be the most pro-life state in the country. We want to outlaw abortion in the state of Oklahoma. Attorney General John O'Connor and I know this bill will be challenged immediately by liberal activists from the coast who always seem to want to come in and dictate and mandate and challenge our way of life here in the state of Oklahoma. The most important thing is to take a stand and protect the unborn and protect life.
All right, well, of course, it's still illegal. I mean, what he's doing. He says liberals. Well, the Supreme Court decided that women had the right to choose. But, of course, that's exactly what they're challenging. And now a lot of constitutional scholars predict that's exactly what they're going to get. I'm trying to book the president of the Great Plains Planned Parenthood chapter to talk about this, hopefully by the end of the week. Would love to get your reaction on it, but just absolutely jarring news. Banning abortion at conception, no exception for rape or incest. Providers fined $100,000 and 10 years in prison. And according to one statistic, abortion bans, of course, do not decrease abortion. They increase women's death by 21%. This bill will kill women, and there's just no way around it. Horrid. Quick, let's go to the host of CBS's Late Show, Stephen Colbert, for some laughs. I need some comedy after that.
News about former President, the douche of hazard. Over the weekend, he weighed in on the political future of charlatan and cater waiter holding the hors d'oeuvres tray with his penis, Dr. Mehmet Oz. Specifically, the former president endorsed Dr. Oz for the U.S. Senate. Come on! He's a con man. And so is Dr. Oz. And now, you see, John, they're both
I'm a fan.
Now, I'd like to list all the scams Dr. Oz has tried to foist on his audience, but we only have an hour show. Among the many snake oil supplements he has peddled are raspberry ketones for fat burning, lavender soap for leg cramps, and strawberries for teeth whitening. None of these work, of course. But, hey, there is one simple trick to make you healthier. Take 2 household bananas, jam one in each ear until you can't hear Dr. Oz anymore. You'll be fine. Or you'll be better.
All right, thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. And now it's time to get to all of the rest of the headlines I've got for you. That's all the audio. But let's see. Rapid fire, the other headlines, the undercovered, the things that still matter in the public's interest. It's time for the News Dump, an old but a classic News Dump jingle from Pete Coe.
World War II ordnance found in some guy's rump, extracted from his anus for today's news dump.
Why is there a cat there? Oh, that's one of my all-time favorites. Okay, Pete Coe, thank you very much. Let's get to those headlines. Let's start with a fun one. Krispy Kreme Donuts announced on Monday it was tapping into its, quote, strategic donut reserve, tethering the cost of a dozen original glazed donuts at participating stores to the national average price for a gallon of gas. And now I'm giving them the press attention they so richly deserve. In their press release, they said the weekly promotion will be available every Wednesday, starting this week and running through May 4th. The Omicron subvariant is now the winner. Almost 90% of U.S. COVID cases. Congratulations, Omicron subvariant BA2. Nearly 90% of new COVID-19 cases in the United States are now more transmissible subvariant of that I just mentioned, BA2, according to new data from the CDC. The BA2 variant is estimated to be about 30% more transmissible than the original Omicron variant, which already spread more easily than earlier variants. We all know somebody who's got it, don't we? All right, how about this one? The Republican Virginia official who called for the Pentagon chief, who is a black man, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, to be lynched. He has resigned. Yeah, the Republican chairman of a Virginia electoral board has stepped down after his horrible Facebook post that he made about the defense secretary and others that came to light last week. His name is David Dietrich, the former chairman of the electoral board in Hampton, and he resigned 2 days after a social media posting was discovered, prompting the governor and other GOP lawmakers to call for his removal. So I guess that's too far, calling for the lynching of the Secretary of Defense, who's a black man. I guess that is where the line is. So they've outlawed abortion, even in cases of rape and incest, but you still can't say that, apparently. Okay. All right. Good to know. Thank you. Here's a terrible story. The Humane Association of Tennessee in Nashville says that the animal shelter admitted to shooting animals instead of putting them down with drugs. Oh, dear. In a report, the Humane Association employee said that he had been shooting animals to euthanize them because their paperwork had issues and their euthanasia solution was expired. Apparently, about 6 dogs were shot at the facility. And just a terrible story coming out of the Tennessee Humane Association, which was not so humane, I think it's fair to say. The governor of Georgia has signed a permitless handgun carry bill into law. So welcome to the wild, wild west, Georgia. Now following Alabama as the second state this year to enact a permitless carry law for handguns. But about 20 states already have similar measures, which is absolutely terrifying that you can now conceal and carry a handgun without a permit. In California, the legislators are actually doing something which arguably I think is pretty great. They're proposing a 4-day work week. California Assembly is considering this legislation this year, and it would be the most substantial change to the modern concept of the work week since the adoption of weekends during the Industrial Revolution. Really interesting story to follow and hopefully trend to follow as well. Well, I mentioned earlier the lieutenant governor of New York has had to step down because of corruption charges. Well, the South Dakota attorney general has now been impeached over a fatal 2020 car crash, which you might have heard about. Jason Ravensborg is his name. He told authorities he had struck a deer or another large animal, but he had actually killed a human. And so he will at least be temporarily removed. So a little worse there in that case. A new study says that Americans use up far more energy than we need for a good and healthy life. Experts say conservation and energy efficiency measures are key to cutting consumption. That would help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and alleviate the energy security crisis caused by the war in Ukraine. But I don't think anybody's going to cut down on their energy consumption as a result, I fear. And sad news that comedian Gilbert Gottfried has died. You probably already heard about this, but I knew Gilbert. I worked with him several times. I interviewed him several times. I met his wife and his kid. He was just a great guy. Everybody loved Gilbert Gottfried. He's hilarious, a massive talent, an icon, and really a tough and sad loss. It's always interesting to be reading all the tributes coming out to him, and there's mine. Gilbert, thank you for always being such a cool dude. Seriously, a great, great guy, and obviously super talented. Well, that's all the news I've got for you on today's show. And now time to get to my guest, Jeff Jarvis, coming up. But first, I've got Wajahat Ali. But I do, of course, want to tell you about Indeed.com, because if you haven't heard, if you're hiring, you need to hire with Indeed.com. They are the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. They're the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. Several listeners have told me they've used Indeed and hired great people for their firms, their companies, small businesses, and start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/standup. The offer is valid through April 30th. Go to Indeed.com/standup to claim your $75 credit before April 30th. Indeed.com/standup. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Go check out that link and support the podcast while you're doing it. Also, thank you to John Carroll for submitting some new bumper transition music, if you will. I'm loving it. All right, coming up, I have an excellent conversation with the great Jeff Jarvis about media and journalism and politics and so much more. Really great. I always learn a lot talking to Jeff. But first, it's time to get to Wajahat Ali, who is one of your favorites here on the show. Always love talking with him. He's the author, most recently, of Go Back to Where You Came From, and other helpful recommendations on how to become American on sale now. So many of you have gotten that book. He's a Daily Beast columnist. He's a speaker traveling all over the country. Just got back from South by Southwest, where he was for almost 2 weeks, and a whole bunch of other places as well. So it was great to catch up with Waj. He's on Twitter at Wajahat Ali. Let's do it.
Yeah, you're good. You look good to me.
Now we're good. No, I couldn't hear you. You were frozen.
Oh, that's not good. That's just white supremacists.
Well, this is an app that is mostly meant for whites.
Yeah, this is true. We envy you whites for giving us these social media apps that we don't have in our shithole countries. This is why we have come to America to replace you, according to the UPenn professor of law. Which is amazing.
Yeah, I saw that this morning. Wax is her name, and she was on with
so. She's been at it for a while. But that's
Carlson.
Wild. Yeah, she went on Tucker Carlson's like more openly racist show on Fox.
Right.
Where he doesn't have to hold back. It's like, it's like Pete Dominic After Hours. If you really want to know what Pete thinks, even subscribe to the show where he'll let his id rage. And this is like, okay, how does a racist become more racist? And that's like Tucker. That's like the new Fox. It's not Fox News. It's that new Fox channel where that's the same place where he promoted the January 6th conspiracy theories that it was like an inside job.
The answer to your question is how does a racist become more racist on TV specifically is, I would argue, the set itself. So, you start with a classic TV set, which I think, Tucker is working in, but then he moves into a more white friendly set. It's like inside a barn.
Or logs, agrarian, rustic.
And also, you do see a lot of, I do feel like, and I hate to say this, but it does seem like conservative broadcasters and politicians seem to own the fireplace. Like, why is that seemingly, Mark Levin has a fireplace and everybody has I think Prager has a fireplace. Why can't liberal commentators have a fireplace?
Oh, because we like air conditioning.
Right.
And we like solar panels and heating. And so it's one of those things where they convey this rustic sense of Americana. That's where Bill Barr, if you remember, when he was Attorney General, he did that infamous interview while he was still Attorney General.
Right. He did do an interview.
Remember that? It was very, very well staged, kind of darkly lit. And there was that little crackling of the fire in the background. He was wearing some North Face, which was a very strange, like he went very stripped down. It was very, I just came back from the South. I spent like the week in Florida and South Carolina, and they really go hardcore into like hunting and fishing. And like I got dropped. I don't know if I told you, but I got dropped off randomly at this gun shop, like a half hour away from the airport, because it was like a 90-minute drive to the airport in South Carolina.
What?
Yeah. So this Uber driver of mine, she was listening to Nirvana. I'm like, she's cool. Then an hour in, she goes, "Oh, I forgot I have an eye appointment. I'm going to drop you off like an hour of the way. Oh, look, how about this shop?" I'm like, "What?" And it was like the middle of South Carolina. I had to get to like the airport, which is like 35 minutes away. And she dropped me off at this gun shop. And it was the same set, like logs and woods. And
Wait, no, that has to be a plan down there. If you get a Muslim-y looking person, come up with some reason that I'm sorry, I have to drop you off the gun shop. And then we'll see what happens.
In the middle of South Carolina, what looked like the forest. And I got in and I was like, first of all, it was the darkest thing there. Second of all, people were very friendly. Third of all, I was the only person wearing a mask. But fourth, I was shocked that it was packed. It was like 3:30 p.m. and it was packed. I'm like, who's buying guns at 3:30 p.m. in the middle of the weekday? Apparently a lot of folks.
I think
it reminded me of the same aesthetics, the same woody aesthetics.
But what you're identifying as the South, I would argue, is just rural everything, because you're describing my childhood, upstate New York. You're describing that's how it is. It's just rural.
Yeah, it's rural, but I think the South has more guns.
I don't know. I think you might be surprised by how many guns we've got in rural areas in upstate New York. It's certainly the laws are more strict in a number of states in terms of how hard it is to get them. And you heard about the ghost gun law?
Oh yeah, the John Malkovich in the line of fire law.
Yeah, it's guns that you can make yourself. Did you see Biden brought up pieces of a gun to illustrate how easy it is? He was up there during his presser in the Rose Garden with he's like, yeah, no, I'm not kidding you. These things, look at it, even I can put it together. It was a weird staging, but
when that movie first of all, that movie's awesome.
Yeah, I love
when that
movie
came out, it was like 93, 94. John Malkovich. For those of you who haven't seen this movie, you should go see it. Malkovich is like an unhinged nut who pretty much like creates his own wooden gun, and he creates like a chamber where I think maybe there's one bullet, right?
Yeah.
And he's able to bypass security, and he has this like whole plan to do assassination, and it works almost. But Clint Eastwood's there to save the day, of course.
And a young young Dylan McDermott and his piercing blue eyes. Yeah.
Look at that deep cut. There's a Dylan McDermott and a Renee Russo who was ascending in her career at that time.
Yeah, that's right.
Transitioning from model to actress. Where she then became the smart, attractive side to the aging Hollywood star, where she was Clint Eastwood's love interest in The Line of Fire and then played Mel Gibson's love interest in Ransom. So this was a glorious period of the high. This is when white men were great. The last period, 95.
Yeah,
before the darkies took over.
You started having more brown and now even Asian men becoming, and now women as well, becoming action stars and stealing the box office from the which is part of the attack on masculinity, is introducing strong female heroes, and then obviously strong brown, even male heroes. We've got a superhero of every background now,
which is very threatening, and we're apparently taking over the Norse god market.
Is that right?
Okay, that's what this all began. The whole plot was, the Jews told us this, is that first we're going to make Idris Elba into a fake Norse god in Thor, Heimdall, and that really triggered the whites. And they're like, look at that. First they come for Heimdall, then they're going to come for Thor. And then, now we have gay superheroes and Muslim superheroes. Once you go after the fake Norse gods, Pete, it's just a matter of time until we get the Constitution.
Well, I've been making a risky argument that after Chaz Boseman passed away, there was that debate if should they replace him with another actor at all. I've actually argued they should replace him with Chris Pratt, a white Black Panther, because I think that we're being replaced, and I think that would be a real stranglehold again on the industry. And
if Idris Elba can play a fake white Norse god Heimdall, why can't Chris Pratt?
That's all I'm saying.
Be the leader of Wakanda and say Wakanda forever.
All I'm arguing. I don't know why.
Who better knows the plight of a marginalized African American community than Chris Pratt?
Right. That's all I'm saying.
It's all acting at the end of the day.
Exactly. Thank you.
Whenever I hear that, so this is the response, right? Because people say an actor should play any role. And shouldn't it matter about the merits? And I'm like, yes, I'm perfectly fine with Chris Pratt playing Black Panther when I get cast as Abraham Lincoln.
Well, you actually do look a little bit like a Browner Lincoln, so I think that's not. Course. Hey, what were you doing? You went to. I want to just hear how your life has been. You've been traveling like crazy for the first time, really, at this level since the pandemic. You were at South by Southwest for what seemed like months.
Yeah, man. So it's the first time in the pandemic that I've been traveling. I went to South by Southwest for 11 days where I interviewed 60 people, didn't get COVID, thank God. Everyone there had to show proof of vaccination because we're still in a pandemic, believe it or not. But apparently people think we're over it. Then for the first time in 3 years, especially since my daughter's cancer, we decided to visit our in-laws, and our in-laws live in Florida. And so we decided to go on a friggin' Tuesday morning, which was like 4 a.m. flight, and avoided the rush because, my daughter's immunosuppressed. But I forgot that I had 3 speeches. And so I had a speech in South Carolina, I had a speech in D.C. that I did virtually, and then I had a speech in New York. So it was like planes, trains, and automobiles with like me being the brown Steve Martin. Like flights got canceled. I'm running like through like Atlanta airport. I got the last seat. Another flight gets canceled. My speaking agency forgot to made a mistake in the return flight, so that's why I have to like drive 90 minutes to North Carolina where I get dropped off at a gun shop. No. Yeah, and then I'm literally like trying to find Uber. There's no Uber. It's like the first time in a long time I could not find a single Uber or Lyft. And then one lady, a Black woman, was like, "You're my first customer ever." I'm like, "Thank you for saving me." And then she takes me the rest of the way. But that's where I met rural, rustic America, where I realized, at 3:30 p.m., gun shops in South Carolina are packed.
You, well, first of all, South by Southwest, what was, just name something that you learned, or what was one of the more impactful people you interviewed and why?
So connecting the dots, speaking about what you can do with technology if you actually care about helping humanity, I met this dude who, along with his team, is now creating 3D printed houses, which are aesthetically appealing, huge, sustainable, and cheap. And apparently they're so successful that now they've teamed up with NASA. Apparently when we're like, due to climate change, when we're like going to the moon, they can potentially print homes on the moon. So this is like a sustainable, replicable process by way they're straight up printing out homes using this new technology. And, like back in the day, it was like this block homes, these ugly Minecraft homes. These are like aesthetically pleasing homes. And they had like a test home in Austin where you could go by and check it out. So we got folks, one side of America is using technology to print guns, and another part of America is relying upon ingenuity to create sustainable housing, because apparently there's a huge housing crisis because poor people can't afford it. And the houses that exist, thanks to deregulation, like, they're not up to safety codes, and they're also ugly. So literally, to help low income and middle income families, we now have the ability to create quickly, just like that, 3D printed homes. I thought that was awesome.
Wow, I'm trying to look him up right now, but I'd love to talk to him or her or anybody else that you talked to if you met some interesting and innovative people at South by Southwest, and I'll have to go there sometime. What did you text me or you emailed me something about? Some observation, I should have had it in front of me, but you're basically like, I think you were in Florida, and you said something along the lines that we're doomed.
I was like exhausted, haven't slept, did 3 speeches, and you just go through Florida, and it's like, sometimes Florida feels like the anus of America, where like, not just because of a geographical location, but you're just like, you get everything, the good and the bad and the ugly, and you're just walking around, you're listening to people, and you're just seeing Let's Go Brandon shirts. And you're seeing otherwise smart people believe that like Biden isn't president. You're seeing like this aggressive type of reaction to a life-saving vaccine. They're just one individual. One individual is not all people there. But like, I took my kids to this Gator Park. Everyone was nice. And this one guy's like, you don't need your mask here. And I thought he'd follow it up with saying, we're all vaccinated. It's outdoors. It's safe. And he goes, no. He goes, the virus is fake after all. I'm like, okay. And so you see, like, you understand, let me put it this way. You understand why Trump can win again in 2024. And even in South Carolina, I had a first time in South Carolina, everyone was lovely, but I went to a university of Southern Carolina, excuse me. And there are professors there who believe the big lie, academics, people with doctorates. And so you're like, okay, if you spend enough time in the South, which is, of course, the South is diverse. There's a lot of blue voters here also, but you get why and how so many people in America believe the big lie, why Trump got the votes he did. And like going back to the whole rustic aesthetic of Tucker Carlson, how we started the show, he knows that base. He knows exactly what he's appealing to. The stripped down flannel shirt, the fake, old school log cabin America, the fire crackling. In the hilarious comedy of all this is, Pete, you and I know all these people are frauds because Tucker Carlson is a bow tie wearing mother effer, the son of privilege, who lives in one of the richest neighborhoods in DC, who is vaccinated, even though he lied to the mega church where he was speaking at recently. Yeah. And all these kids, all their kids go to private schools and they're all vaccinated. That's the irony of it all. But they know the base, and that's where the base is at.
Right. Well, so your point was, you wrote, where is it? That's a wrap on America. The death rattle. He goes, Waj wrote, is sitting in Florida, I realized it's a wrap on America. Like the death rattle, you can sense it just talking to people here, listening to them, seeing the way they live, hearing their conspiracy theories. Sad days, man. Yeah, and I mean, you just basically...
I wrote that? Oh, yeah. I probably just wrote that to you because I think I was exhausted, and I, traveled around the South, sure. And I've also went around the Midwest and the Rust Belt, real America. But you see it, right? Like in Florida, in the South, you hear it, you see it. People are out in the open, and you're like, they'll burn it all down for whiteness.
I'm sorry, do you mind me reading that? I mean, do you stand by that, or are you being unnecessarily negative?
I was being a bit negative, but at the same time, obviously you can't do the Thomas Friedman view of journalism where you're in a cab and you talk to one person. But you look at that, it's the data, it's what's happening in the country, the elections, the attack on women's rights, the don't say gay, the attack on CRT, the attack on voting rights, the gerrymandering. And you see in Florida, it's Florida and Texas that's leading the way. We've talked about this on your podcast before, right? And Abbott and DeSantis are the ones going further to the right to court the base, and they want to grab the mantle from Trump in case he dies or gets arrested, which he won't, because he's probably going to live forever. And so you're seeing, okay, if you want a bellwether of where the conservative movement is and where the GOP is, I've written articles about this. Look at Texas, look at Florida. And I was in Florida for a week, right? And you see it. You see where a third of this country probably is at, where they live on Earth 3, where there's no coronavirus. It's a hoax. No one takes the vaccine, where they're aggressively anti-mask, where, CRT is the biggest threat. Don't say gay. DeSantis is the hero. and Joe Biden is not the legitimate president. And you realize, oh, Trump got more votes in 2020 than he got in 2016. So for us living in purplish states or blue states, or for us in the liberal, which is, I would say, the mainstream ecosystem, to deny these people and to dismiss them or to simply say, oh, it'll never happen, I think we're deluding ourselves. In my justification for the text that I sent you at that time.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate all the context, and that's why it matters for people who are, talking and commenting the way you are to do just that, to get out. And I think that we haven't been able to get out because of COVID. And then during COVID, we all, established and were affected by COVID and our views on all kinds of things. And now that we're out, we're sharing what we learned. And what we learned was continuing education about things that we were curious and ignorant about in the past. And what certain people learned are conspiracy theories, and, really got attached to them, to the point where I want to ask you where you think the Republican Party base or grassroots are, because I think I wonder how underrepresented or how overrepresented the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world are, that now all Democrats are, quote, groomers or pedophiles.
So I've been writing about this for a while now.
Yeah.
And you could see in my Daily Beast columns, and I've talked about it, I think, on your show, where I say that the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Boobarts, the Gates, the Gosars are the present and future of the party. They are the base. When Marjorie Taylor Greene went on Steve Bannon's show in defense of Lauren Boebert's Islamophobic lies against Ilhan Omar, she said, "I'm the base." I said, "I agree with you." Now, at the time last year, what I was told by professionals who paid way more money than you and me to give terrible advice to Democrats and who get awesome TV contracts, even though they're always wrong, is that Waj, you're being a cynic. It's the adults in the room. Yes, it's the Mitch McConnell who's terrible, but he's still the base. It's that corporate America that's still somewhat responsible. I'm like, you guys are missing out. You're not paying attention. This is why going and visiting, and talking to people and going to Trump rallies and going to the Rust Belt and you're dipping your toes in right-wing media ecosystem, even though it might be masochistic and painful, is important, because you realize that Marjorie Taylor Greene is the present and future. And if you don't believe me, look at what happened during the confirmation hearing of Judge Jackson. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who's the most qualified of all the judges, they brought up the grooming talking point then. It was successful. It stuck. And I said it again. I said, this is a sneak preview of the 2022-2024 elections. And voila, now in the past 2 weeks, it's on steroids. Okay, groomer, going after Disney. And the hypocrisy and the projection of it all is that if you really care about kids, I have some names for you. Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, Roy Moore, right? The
former Speaker of the House, the Republican. There's so many Republicans and conservative religious types of the Catholic Church. I mean, come on.
Yeah, the Catholic Church, the RNC guy who just got convicted for child porn. And so this is part of the QAnon conspiracy that just 2 years ago, the FBI was warning has the potential to be a domestic terror threat that I kept tweeting about, right? I kept writing about. And I said, you guys are not paying attention. This is going to be mainstream. I wrote it last year, the huge article I wrote in the Daily Beast, CRT.
I thought
you're not paying attention.
I thought you were wrong.
Yeah, a lot of people thought I was wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. I think this is the present and the future. This is white supremacy on steroids. They're playing for all the marbles. And when you go talk to people, look, no one fights you, but they live on Earth 3, man. I've given this analogy on your show before. They live on Earth 3.
Right.
It's a self-contained media ecosystem that fuels lies and conspiracy theories, and the people who are fueling it know it's bullshit, but they know the base eats it up. And now the QAnon one is so dangerous because they are convinced that the rest of us are grooming and trafficking children. And what do parents do when kids are involved, Pete?
Well,
they bust heads. You rationalize violence.
Yeah.
I'll give you one quick example. Let's take it back a few years. Pizzagate. 2016. Remember that guy who came right here at this pizza place that I've actually been to before in DC? He shows up with a gun. He says, "Where are the kids?" Like, what the F are you talking about? This is like a ping pong pizza place. He was convinced that Hillary Clinton Democrats were kidnapping and enslaving children for sex trafficking at the basement of this pizza place.
Right.
And that guy was not crazy. He said, "I'm just here to save the children." He got radicalized. Now imagine that times 1,000. And that's where we're at.
The issue that the idea of what you're saying is if one believes that their children are being targeted for sexual whatever crimes as prey, then you get active. But to a lesser extent and to an even more believable extent, something similar is that your kids are being targeted for liberal indoctrination, specifically CRT. You know, I'm in the mix of it, as you know. I'm going to a board meeting tonight to make sure I have my voice heard, and we're organizing to get our 2 people on that live on Earth 1. But you are hearing this. Did you hear David Mamet on Mark Levin's Fox News show?
Not surprised, man. I've been on the Mamet train for a while in the sense that I've been following. And
so
his
just say a bit about how animating, Tim Wise wrote a great piece about this, as has several others. Certain types of folks believe they own their children. So it's a more serious threat, and it's certainly animating these parents and voters to go up and show up at the BOE meetings, because we're indoctrinating them into thinking that their white kids should be ashamed of themselves and worse.
Well, look, Kellyanne Conway said it yesterday. She revealed the playbook, right? We care about kids.
Is that right? I didn't see that.
Yeah. So she's making her comeback and saying, us Republicans, we're the ones who care about our kids. We're the ones who care about parents, which is hilarious if you actually do a deep dive. You don't even have to do a deep dive. That's a pretty dysfunctional family. Just go look at our daughter's TikToks.
Oh, come on. For her to,
it's all projection, right? So they realized early on in 2016, even Kellyanne Conway said this. I pay attention to these people, Pete. I take them literally and seriously. She went to the DNC apparently. And she says, we got them. All they care about is transgender bathrooms and race and gender. Easy. And she thought, okay, culture war. Lead with CRT. Liberals are making your son into a daughter, your daughter into a butch lesbian. They're attacking gender norms. They hate religion. They're going to become Marxists. They hate white people and play up anti-blackness. And boom, it's a wrap. And lo and behold, you think, oh, it's so cynical. That won't work in America. Working like gangbusters. There was no message, proactive or counter, in Virginia to Glenn Youngkin. I was on your show. I said, I think this dude might win.
Yeah.
People here said, you're crazy. Who wins? By 2 points.
Yeah, and you live there, just in Virginia.
And I live there. And the suburban parents on the deal, no one's going to admit this. I had conversations with folks who said, these Democrats, these are Democratic voters, Pete. They're going to turn our kids gay. And I'm like, no one's turning your kid gay. No, it's too much now. Gay marriage was fine, but now transgender, it's too much.
Right.
Voila. Panic. Parent panic. It works.
Yeah, that's definitely an animating factor for sure. And now tying it all together with an incident that happened in New York today where there were a bunch of people on a subway that were shot and there was some smoke, grenades or something, and, details still coming out. But of course, the reaction, what was it the phrase that the local reporter called classic terrorism?
Classic. This is classic old-fashioned. This isn't classic old-fashioned log cabin terrorism.
The question, though, remains that even if a brown Muslim terrorist were responsible for that or something similar to that, it still wouldn't make that a more insidious and realistic threat than millions and millions of classic Americans believing in QAnon theories, because that we can all talk about what that leads to. It's a breakdown of any kind of authority. The QAnon, I mean, it's absolutely insane. What's worse?
Well, so look, if you're talking about classic terrorism in America, it's white supremacist terrorism.
Well, yeah, you're right. If you want to be,
it's the number one domestic terror threat in America, but it's completely ignored, deliberately so, by the Trump administration, according to the whistleblowers. This DHS whistleblower who said they deliberately downplayed that and tried to upplay Antifa and BLM. Right? Classic terrorism in the mindscape of America since the war on terror is Muslim. Black and brown person equals terrorism. White person, unhinged individual, right? So you're seeing that at play. Then you're seeing what you just said with QAnon, and the reason why we should be really concerned about this is when the FBI 2 years ago was saying that this is a potential radicalizing effect on both individuals and groups. They were afraid that this is a domestic terror threat that will radicalize otherwise sane people to commit violence. Now that this is a mainstream talking point of the RNC and Republican politicians who know better, what is the end result, Pete? Violence. People are going to. That's what I'm really worried about. Sure. My wife told me. My wife said, "Look what happened in Brooklyn today. We still don't know what happened as a result of as up to date with this podcast right now. We'll probably find out more tonight or tomorrow." But I told my wife, "Get used to this. This type of asymmetric warfare, one-offs, lone wolves, crazy individuals. This is going to be the norm for the next 5 to 10 years. And I want to be wrong. I don't think I am on this.
What was the best experience your family had on your travels? And I'll let you go.
It was good, man. Like
where did you go to? Florida, like one of those swamp boat things?
Yeah, we went to one of those swamp boat things. It was fun. We saw some gators. Apparently, it was a lake which has the most gators in the world. It was fun. Florida has a lot of fun stuff, man. It's a huge state. People forget that, it almost elects Republicans. DeSantis barely won, dude.
Yeah.
People always forget that. I think he won by 32,000 votes. It's due to voter suppression. But you also see, and I've been following Florida politics due to Islamophobia. Like, you see, like, the hub of this right-wing fervor emerge from Florida. Like, Florida and Texas, right? Wisconsin also. There's some places in America, if you really want a pulse of where the Republican Party is going, look to Florida. So I'm not crapping on Florida. I had a great time. My kids wore their masks. They got to see their in-laws. The weather was good. They went to Legoland. They went to they saw some gators. So just the fact that, after 3 years and my daughter's cancer, the fact that as a family, we traveled for the first time and were relatively safe, wore our masks, saw our in-laws, that's a blessing. I always tell people survival is a victory in this day and age where we're about to hit the 1 million dead mark in America.
Yeah, we probably already surpassed it, right?
Yeah, we surpassed it.
Yeah. Well, a great point to end on in terms of being grateful for each day and what you've got in each moment, which is certainly my practice, how I try to live my life. So, and I'm grateful that I got to talk to you. I've been wanting to talk to you since you were in Texas, and I've been waiting patiently. So thank you very much for joining me.
I'll give you some. I mean, seriously, some of these folks that I interviewed, I'll send you a list afterwards.
Yeah. If you want to make a list,
really interesting people who are actually trying to do good work. What I'll tell you a takeaway from Texas. And what kind of freaked me out is all these folks realize that we cannot rely upon the government or elected officials, so they're just relying upon themselves to get shit done. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, but that's sad to me. That people are like, yeah, we can't wait. There's too many problems. There's too many challenges. Climate change is happening. Right. We're moving at a sloth-like pace. So we just got to step up. So it's simultaneously very inspiring, but at the same time makes you realize, the institutions and the people that we look to lead us in these moments of crisis are not going to get the job done.
Dude, I've got some bad news for you. We're the ones we've been waiting for.
Oh, that makes me feel so inspired. What I always tell people is the Avengers aren't coming.
We're the ones we've been waiting for. And you're conditioning right now. Are you still doing the 3 miles? How many?
I'm fasting. So if this,
oh dear, happy Ramadan. Forgot.
I'm exhausted and I'm fasting. So if I wasn't as lucid as I usually am not,
no, I didn't notice.
I blame my fasting. For us right now, it's we stopped drinking and eating at 5:19, and then I break my fast at 7:50 p.m.
Well, good luck.
But I walked today. I also walked, and I'm doing my push-ups and crunches at night.
And you stand by that practice because it does what for you?
Fasting. I'm glad you asked. Now they're saying intermittent fasting is good. It helps you lose weight. It's good for the soul. I'm yeah, man. There's a reason why people have been doing it for thousands of years.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual discipline that puts you in a specific mindset. It puts me in a mindset where it makes me God conscious, and it makes me realize the lack of these things that are going in my body. What do I replace it with? Right. So you realize, you don't need that much. The first 3 days are hard, but then your body gets used to it. There's a strange lightness. And then the mental, physical discipline of doing the ritual puts you in a mental state where you're forced to be a better person, right? That's why you do it. There's a saying that says, if all you get from Ramadan is an empty stomach and a parched throat, you did it wrong. And so, you could do it for weight loss. And you could do it to say, I need less in life. I could be minimalist. But you're also supposed to work on your character. So even I'll give you an example. It was a brutal last week of travel. I didn't sleep. 4 cities, 2 days. 3 speeches, and I should have been cranky. It could have been cranky. It could have been worse. But I realized, I'm fasting.
Right.
So I'm like, you know what? Life is still good. I'm alive. I made it. Be grateful. Be kind. So that mindset, it's the Ramadan state of mind that I think the discipline and the ritual helps me with.
Yeah, I mean, I basically knew all that, and I already accomplished that without fasting. So yeah.
Well, you're the master race. Which is why I envy you.
How long
In
do you
order
do
to
it?
be like you, Pete Dominic, I need to fast for 30 days.
I have really very little kind of, discipline in my life. I need to, constantly every day work on my practice and kind of create it. How many days do you do it?
30 days, man.
Yeah.
Month of Ramadan.
All right,
29
well,
or 30, depending on the moon. But it's a full month. I think we're about 12 days in now, maybe.
All right.
So,
well, continued success with that. I do appreciate everything you just said and the perspective. It's really interesting. And so,
as Pete drinks water in front of me.
Oh, that's not water. It's liquid food.
Yeah. Are you doing that?
No, I just wanted to make you hungry and jealous. So it's actually
that just makes me hangry.
It's a grilled cheese in there.
It's a liquid grilled cheese. It's Soylent Green as cheese.
I love you, buddy. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you very much talking to me again today.
All right, man. Later.
Wajahat Ali, everybody. Follow him on Twitter at Wajahat Ali. Read him at the Daily Beast. Let him know you heard him here on the program. Go get that book, everybody. Such a great read. If you haven't gotten it already, you need to go back to where you came from. And again, tell Waj I said hi. Thank him. Why am I telling you to tell him I said hi? Tell him you heard him on the show. Tell him Pete says hi. I don't know why he told me to tell you that, because you guys just talked and I listened, so this is weird. Okay, well, now it's time to get to my second guest of the show. Always love my conversations with Jeff Jarvis. His perspective is so interesting and unique and informed. Jeff has been commenting and teaching and writing for a long time. He is the media's pundit. You can read him at buzzmachine.com. You can watch him or listen to him on This Week in Google, the podcast he hosts, and follow him on Twitter at Jeff Jarvis. A great conversation, as always, with this Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism professor. Let's do it right now with Jeff Jarvis. But how old is your dad?
96 now.
What is 96 like?
Present, he's doing very well. His mood is good, which is great. His present tense memory sucks. He can remember things from 2 days ago. He can think in the future, but ask him 5 minutes after lunch what he had for lunch. He has no idea. None.
Does he have help?
Oh, yeah. He's living in a assisted living.
How's that?
It's generally okay. He's happy. It's just one room, but that's what he's kind of comfortable in. So it's okay. After he got breakthrough COVID, and after that, and he was in rehab, he kind of was in a bit of a panic. Like, how am I going to get this kind of care? What am I going to do when I get out of here? So that's why you're in this place. That's why we're going to get you the help. And so he was grateful for it. Thank goodness. He could have been resistant. He could have hated it, but he didn't. The other thing about my father that's interesting is that he was a rabid Fox, Florida man, watches Fox all day.
Okay.
And after being in the hospital with COVID and his hearing aid being out of whack for an undetermined amount of time and his ear plugged with God knows what for an undetermined amount of time, he wasn't watching Fox for some period. And now you can hear him say, I think Biden's doing a good job. I'm glad we have Biden on Trump. It's really interesting. It's like that story recently about the people they paid to watch CNN instead of watching Fox, right? I've seen that laboratory with my father, where after Fox gets cut off, his rational self returned.
Well, it sounds like you're suggesting hearing loss on a huge portion of the country as a way to streamline. Well, yes. I mean, do we need
all their ears with wax and we'll be fine?
Did we need that study? Have you ever spent 5 minutes listening to Hannity or Mark Levin, much less Alex Jones or now Joe Rogan? I mean, if you watched Fox News exclusively, I understand why people feel the way they feel. Why they're angry, why they're terrified to some extent.
So I have used money from the school to hire a graduate of the school named Juliet Jeske to do a service called Decoding Fox News. So that's the handle on both Twitter and on Substack. And the idea behind this, which I think that you and I have talked about, you've heard me say it on MSNBC Air, we were on together, that I wished MSNBC would do a feature, we watch Fox News so you don't have to. So I think it's important to see what our grandparents are being exposed to and what they're not being exposed to. And there's some people like Aaron Rupar who do a really good job of that on Twitter.
Yep.
But I think we need mainstream media attention to this. My favorite event of the year is the International Journalism Festival in Perugia, Italy, which I should have been at last week, but I'm old and nervous about germs, so I didn't go. However, I moderated a panel there on the elephant in our room in journalism, otherwise known as Murdoch. And it was an interesting discussion from across continents about what we do about Murdoch. And one of my, and I don't know what that is. Do we, there was no solution that came out of it. Do we kick them out of the White House press corps? Well, the White House press corps is pretty much useless anyway. But we've got to recognize how much mainstream media is playing, liberal media is playing along by letting Fox News set the agenda.
Why do we need to know what they are saying? I struggle with that. I play clips when I find them generally on the podcast. I'll try to grab a couple clips from either some crazy preacher, Ron DeSantis, Trump himself, or, Tucker or whatever. I mean, I feel like I can't play too many because it'll make people upset and miserable, and it's just so depressing, and I don't want them to have that feeling necessarily. But I do think that we have to know what they're saying over there. I'm really interested in Juliet's work. I just looked it up and followed at Decoding Fox News. I hope everybody else will. So why do we need to hear what they're saying?
I think we need to know about Fox as a political actor. I don't think we need to listen to everybody, every tattooed, gun-loving person in an Ohio diner. The New York Times today did another focus group with, half dozen conservative people. And what do they care? Well, I mean, I believe firmly in listening, but I think we have to listen in context and not just hear paranoia and hate for its own sake.
Right.
But I do think that mainstream media has to understand the manipulation that goes on. So I had a Twitter fit yesterday.
Yeah.
I was watching Morning Joe. I should know better. And they pissed me off again.
Yes.
So I took a picture.
You watch Morning Joe, so we don't have to, by the way.
Well, so exactly that. So I took a picture of a graphic on the screen, midterm issues for Democrats, quote, woke up. Okay, these are the issues. I had a fit.
What is it?
One,
woke
up. I don't know what that means. They were on with the Reverend Al, who gave us our current mayor of New York. And
he did?
They were criticizing liberals. Okay. So midterm issues for Democrats. Here are the issues they listed. 4 of them. 1, censoring of conservative voices on social media. 2, college campuses becoming liberal echo chambers. 3, the push to be, quote unquote, politically correct. Welcome 1996. And 4, canceling, air quotes, historical figures. Well, 1, conservative voices have all the say they want on media. And Joe Scarborough himself is one of the people who screamed loudest, saying, Facebook, you've got to clean this up. So when Facebook goes and cleans it up and gets rid of shit, the conservatives say, whoa, that was my shit. 2, college campuses becoming liberal echo chambers. No, college campuses are the victims of concerted, well-financed conservative attacks on them. And they're all performative. Look at University of Virginia right now, where former Vice President Pence is speaking, and people are protesting. Well, of course they are. The man was part of a criminal enterprise. 3, politically correct. I mean, Jesus, I looked at Google Ngram, and that peaked in 1996, literally, and it's been down ever since. And then 4, canceling historical figures. Well, yeah, I mean, should we honor people who thought they could own human beings? That's worthy of discussion in a democracy. So this is what they say are issues. No, the issues are jobs. And Joe Biden has created a phenomenal number of them. The issue is the economy. Yes, there's inflation, but for reasons we know, the pandemic and a war. The issues are inequity and racism. The issues are misogyny, stopping women from controlling their bodies. Those are issues, not political correctness. So sorry, I just had
I love it. Love all of that. First of all, Joe Scarborough is a traditional conservative American. I just think maybe we need to have a conference on doing away with just retiring all the old words. I used to try not to use the words liberal, conservative, Republican, or Democrat when I first started my radio show, because I used to just say, I just want to talk about the issues. If you call in and you say, I'm a conservative. Now I have made assumptions and decided what you believe. And I don't want that. I just want to hear your argument, your point of view on a thing. And for years, we talked and we argued about, oh, man, did we argue about the Iraq War and foreign policy and all kinds of cultural issues, but obviously in tax issues and economics and obviously climate.
Right.
But now I feel like we need to use terminology. So retire the old terminology. Now, just like I use Earth 1 and Earth 2.
Well, yeah, I wonder whether you think this too, Pete, because you've been on MSNBC a lot. You know the players. I've never been on Morning Joe, and I think you have.
No, I don't. No, I've never been on Morning Joe.
Really? Oh,
I don't think so.
Well, this will stop either of us from getting on. I almost have a little bit of pity for Joe because he keeps talking about trying to reclaim the Republican Party as if it still exists to reclaim.
Right.
It's not there. It's gone. It's dead, man. And these aren't true conservatives. They don't care about you calling them that. You think that's an insult to them. It's not. It doesn't matter to them. They're not there for conservatism as a cause that drove you to run for Congress, Joe. It's gone. And so we've got to grapple with these people in a new understanding of who they are.
Yeah, we need to have a new language to understand who they are, because I feel like at this point when I'm talking to folks, I want to get a baseline on what they believe. Right now, we're in a very divisive battle in our community over the Board of Education. And when we're talking about, if we got to talk about some kind of education policy from testing to class size to anything else, that'd be great. But I would still want to know what they think about, say, vaccines or the election outcome or climate. So then I know how to just see where they're coming from when it comes to class size or anything else, education policy. I need a baseline, Jeff. I need a baseline to know where, if you think I'm a groomer, because if you think I'm a pedophile, then I'm not sure why we're talking.
Well, we're going to get together. So I read an interesting paper recently because I try to fake it. I'm only a journalism professor, but occasionally I try to fake it like I'm an academic, and I go on. And so I was recommended to a paper by a Cambridge fellow, which I guess means he's not graduated yet. I don't know, but it's very good, called The Marketplace of Rationalizations. And it's very academic-y. But what he argues, his name is Daniel Williams, to give him credit. What he argues is that we're in a belief-based system. And that in a belief-based system, if you and this is a kind of a smarter variant on the echo chamber filter bubble, which don't really exist, but he expresses it better because he says if you have a belief that you want to hold on to, you look for a rationalization to let you hold on to it. And so that creates what he called a marketplace for rationalizations. Hey, I'm going to give you what you need to let you believe what you want to believe. That is the essence of Fox News. Right. We're going to tell you it doesn't really matter if you really believe that people are pedophiles. You will kind of want to believe it because you want to dislike them. So this gives you a rationalization to dislike the people you want to dislike.
Yes.
And there's another paper by William Bong Peterson. I think it's Michael Bong Peterson is his name, a Danish researcher who said that the internet doesn't make us hate. People already have their hate. He said the filter bubble that exists, the echo chamber that exists, is in your real life, that you only connect with people who are like you. And what the internet does is it pops that bubble and it exposes you to the people you already know you don't like. And it gives you the ammunition, the spitballs to throw at them. Right? So you put these two things together, and journalism and media are not built for this reality. Right? Rather than being belief-based, we're fact-based. If we just give people the facts, everything will be okay. Well, no, we've got to give people true rationalizations for the beliefs that they probably know they ought to have. And we're not built for that. How do we give people a rationalization for climate change so they understand how it affects their lives? How do we give people a rationalization for equity? How do we give them a rationalization for justice? How do we put it in the terms that they might grab onto? Now, that might make us in media into propagandists, but so be it.
Those are so many good thoughts. I'd love to talk to all of these researchers. I'd also love to talk with Juliet Jeske in this project.
We can arrange that easily.
For sure, because I've been wondering, who is doing that kind of thing. There are outlets like Media Matters and other nonprofits that kind of a right-wing watch and so on. But I love what she's doing here. When you talk about the marketplace of rationalizations and I just, if you don't like somebody, you're likely to believe a bad thing about them, period.
Precisely.
But,
and anybody who offers you that, you're prone to believe it, yes, but you won't. But fine, I'll take it because it gives me what I want.
On the issue, though, let me try to split a hair with what you were saying, because I understand why people have varying degrees on equity, whether it be gender equity, the men not understanding what women deal with, or racial equity, white folks not understanding and having empathy for what black and brown folks deal with. But when it comes to something like COVID and climate, you're actually experiencing it. You're living it. Why do we need to have such a wide spectrum of marketplace to rationalize a thing that it's not affecting us equally? That's for sure. It's not impacting us equally, but you can't deny it. You're seeing it. You're seeing people dying of COVID. You're seeing the fires and the floods.
Well, here I go back to Hannah Arendt, who I think I've mentioned on this show before. And in a totalitarian system, which is going to the extreme, she said people tie on to abstract notions over their everyday concerns. So I don't think that most people on the right really, really, really in their everyday lives, in their family lives, that the guns are the most important thing in their lives, or that stopping abortion is something that really matters to their life every single day. They are like you and me, and that they care about finding food for the table and staying safe. But yet, when you end up getting influenced in this way, in this belief system, then you prioritize these abstract notions. Don't tell me what to do about vaccinations. That limits my freedom, over the rational notion of staying safe and alive. And it's phenomenal, but this is the human brain, and we got to deal with it.
You probably find your favorite talker on YouTube, podcast, radio, TV, who says what you want to hear and gives you great arguments on your favorite issue of guns. And then you listen to the next hour, and now he's telling you about what government wants to take from you, and it feels it's within the same thread. One thing, though, just to get it more specific, is one of the things I loved and thought it was so important to learn about and debate on the old show, and we did it for 100 hours, was the healthcare system, and specifically health insurance. Yes. And Jeff, that's one of those where I always find it. How did the right wing convince the American public that the private sector could do paper pushing better? Health insurance. I'm not talking about hospitals. I'm not talking about drugs, treatment, any of it. I'm just the insurance part. Why do we need that? Unlike every other country in the world.
I've never understood, Pete. I've never understood why corporate America doesn't say we shouldn't be paying for health.
Yes, right. I argued that with the CEO.
Take that away from us.
I argued that with Mel Karmazin, former CEO of SiriusXM. I said, Mel, why wouldn't you be supportive of universal health care so you didn't have to cover my health care? And he said you've heard a lot of people say this, but he said it to my face. He's like, it gives us, these types of benefits give us a way to attract better people, better talent. Having benefits, health insurance, our policies give us an upper hand on some other radio company.
Well, in that case, why don't they give us clothes?
We got donuts. Like when I was there, I think there was pizza once as well that was left in the kitchen. It wasn't actually sponsored by the corporate. It was just the head of sports. He bought pizza and there was some left over. I want to talk to you about several other things here that of course, you've been covering and thinking about and writing about and discussing with others in all different places. And the newest columnist at the New York Times is a really interesting and smart woman who has just written her first column, and you are tweeting about it. Her last name is Cottum, Cottum, I believe.
O-M. Tracy McMillan Cottum.
Is that how you say it? Yes. And she is a black woman, I think.
And an associate professor at the University of North Carolina in the School of Information and Library Science. And she's been a newsletter writer at the Times, but got promoted to huzzas and happiness from smart people.
First of all, that's interesting.
Full opinion columnist.
That's an interesting infrastructure that the New York Times has a series of newsletters that they sponsor, Substack-like newsletters that they sponsor, right? And then I would imagine in that marketplace, the people who get the most views or traffic or engagement would be those who you might want to promote. I don't know if that's what happened, but it's like a farm team for columnists.
That's what it's turned into. I think that, there was a time when blogs were that and podcasts are probably that as well.
Yeah.
But she's brilliant and she's written some really wonderful newsletter posts. So now she's a full out columnist. This is her first one. And I thought it was a wonderful column. It's about shame. And what I loved about it best was that
what's shame got to do with it is the title.
She subtly shamed the hand that publishes her, the New York Times, for them shaming the public discussion. So she says the Times editorial board recently implicated fear of shame, that's a link, as cause for Americans losing hold of a fundamental right as citizens of a free country. Well, this was a Times editorial, which I just hated, saying that America has a free speech problem, and it's all this cancer culture bullshit. Oh, poor people can't talk and say what they say. With a horrible poll behind it. It was miserable. But I thought it was really gutsy in her very first column to criticize the Times. Right after, and we'll get to this, I imagine, in a few minutes, Dean Baquet has said how much he hates journalists criticizing their own institution or even other journalistic institutions.
Yeah, the editor of the New York Times. Yeah.
But it's a very good column. And what I also like about it, Pete, and again, I am not a real academic. I'm a journalism professor. I'm not a PhD. I fake it, right? So I'm not an academic, but I get to hang out with them, and I like them and I respect them. So here we have a sociology professor bringing the wisdom and experience of her discipline to journalism. I welcome that. My friend Siva Vaidyanathan, who's at the University of Virginia, who's a brilliant media and legal scholar, gets pissed off all the time when journalists don't call the academics to take advantage of the research and expertise they have. So the fact that, and by the way, this is another project I'm doing out of the school where I've hired someone to find research on internet impact so we can share that with journalists, so we can make them understand that there's value in what the academics say. So the Times hires Khatam to do a column, and she waves the academic flag there and says, I'm academic and proud of it. I was very happy about that too.
Yeah, and I could not agree more with you. I love the academics who are great at writing for the average reader, average person in public, engaged person. I don't know what the terminology is for the target audience of that demographic, but Dr. Aaron Carroll is one of my best friends, also one of the smartest health science researchers in the country, now chief medical officer at Indiana University, writes the most human things in the pages of The Atlantic and the New York Times, and with that kind of credibility of being an academic and actually doing the research and understanding how research is done. And so I couldn't agree and endorse more that type of a writer. But I wonder what this is the first piece of hers that I have read, and it's wonderful. What's shame got to do with it? She writes, bad faith actors want the moral superiority of being stigmatized. That alone, that sentence alone is a fascinating sentence, and it explains to some extent why anybody from ableist to white to heterosexual to Christians, who are the majority, feel persecuted and discriminated against because it's bad faith to a huge extent, even though I'm sure a lot of them believe it, but that they want this moral superiority that comes with being stigmatized.
This is another box on the shelf of the supermarket of the marketplace of rationalizations. Right? I may be white and privileged, but I want to feel like I'm a victim. Can you show me how I'm a victim? Yes, you're getting canceled. Right. And that's exactly what's going on.
She writes, but some behavior is, well, shameful. Being ashamed is not cause for alarm in these circumstances. There's just so many different examples that you could point to. She says, when we elevate shame from psychological state to a social problem, we value systems of oppression that stigmatize those with the least power. And then she goes on.
Wait, stop there, right? Yeah. Just stop there. Isn't that a beautiful academic statement? My friend Jay Rosen at NYU, kind of my mentor trying to act like a professor. And what professors do so brilliantly is they abstract the world. They stand back and say, what's going on here? And that's a magnificent expression of what's going on here.
Yes. And I mean, there's so many more things I could have pulled, but one last thing she writes in this piece, which I think is so important for so many reasons. I'm so glad you turned me on to it and we're talking about it. She writes, no matter what some would say about shame, public life is more plural and diverse and democratic than it has ever been. What we took for consensus in a smaller public square was really domination of those who could not afford the price of entry by those who could.
Right.
Wonderful.
Before you leave this, can I also give a plug to the other person I just mentioned named Deara Towns, another alum I hired. And so her Twitter handle is, the initiative that she's running for us is TKC Internet, Town Night Center Internet. And then the Medium page is redesigning the internet. And what she's doing is trying to find research and researchers like the ones we've been discussing to be able to get them to journalists and talk show hosts to help inform their work and to honor the research that's going on instead of going off of presumptions, right? The presumption right now in media, look at Morning Joe, is that there is such a thing as cancel culture, that there is such a thing as woke, that there is such a thing as people at the New York Times, that shame is somehow affecting free speech. That presumption is leading to interventions, including the right wing trying to create laws to force platforms to carry noxious speech. And in the UK, to take down legal but quote unquote harmful speech. We have all of these kinds of interventions coming from media and politics that are ill-informed, and we need to bring in the voice and experience and data of researchers.
Yes, that's a great project. I might want to work full-time on that project.
Fine.
Because,
very little money.
I've constantly, my entire career, only been good at one thing, and that's finding the right people to talk to. And that's where so much of my, I think, credibility and trust with my audience it lies. And the rest of it is because they really know me. They have full access to me.
That's to my mind, that is the core key skill needed in the future of the internet, is that we have
discernment.
And active curation.
Yeah.
And recommendation. Right. So, and I think this is the essence behind Jack Dorsey, co-founder of Twitter, his vision for what he calls blue sky. It's a recognition that now the speech layer of the internet is a commodity. Everyone can speak. And I celebrate that. Some don't, but I do. And among that, yeah, there are jerks and assholes and idiots. And all we're concentrating on today in the discussion about the internet is getting rid of the jerks and assholes and idiots, right? But instead, what we should be doing is finding those who are worth hearing, finding the experts, the authorities, the artful people, the interesting people, the relevant things that they have to say. That's where we should put in our effort, is into the kind of conversation we want over the kind of conversation we don't want. And there are always going to be assholes out there. There always have been, always will be. We're not going to get rid of them. And putting all this effort into that is worthless. So what you do, though you bring on a few assholes like me, what you do is to try to find the people who have something to say and have a conversation with them. That is the essence of the future of the net that I want to see.
Well, you are of great value because of all of the resources that you've shown me and the way and your ability to talk about them and aggregate them on so many different issues, from journalism and media to COVID, with what you did with your collection of scientists. But let me shift gears one quick thing. You're one of the few whites who I will talk about black related things without a black person in the room, because I find you so thoughtful. And
no. I'm always learning. I am always. I can never.
I know that you are. Of course you are. But this is generally speaking a kind of white issue anyway. But I was getting sad yesterday thinking about, I was watching Ron DeSantis and his like anti-woke act and all this stuff. And I got sad thinking about how wonderful of a word woke was, and how if a minority, specifically it would seem like as the black community, who I would hear use it almost exclusively, would say it about you or about someone else, you knew what it meant. And if they said it about you, it was a high compliment. It was the highest compliment. It was like all of the trust and credibility that you might try to build with if you're a man, women, or if you're a white person, black folks, or whatever else. That takes a long time. But when one black person says about you, he's woke, it meant he's one of the good ones. And now that word is gone. It's like been destroyed. And it made me sad. And I don't know what my question is, but it just seems sad when you have great terminology created by minorities for minorities to help communicate, and it gets hijacked. And we've seen it over and over throughout human history.
Here again, I'm going to recommend a paper. A brilliant researcher named Meredith Clark, who was University of Virginia, has now gone to Northeastern University. She has researched this, how woke was a black culture term and got taken over and bastardized by us white people. There's a paper called Drag Them, a brief etymology of so-called cancel culture that Meredith did in 2020. And she's the expert on Black Twitter. She has a book coming out on Black Twitter. She and Andre Brock Jr. are the two people I call on most when it comes to that. And so, yes, it was truly a matter of cultural theft, and to take over the word woke and then to use it back. And it's all ruined now. That's what we do. We white people, we ruin things.
Yeah, it just seems. Well, I'm going to look into her work because I want to understand that. But it's hard. And by the way, the other new term that I'm learning is parental rights as it relates to parents and their schools. And great, smart listener, Maddie Carlson, thought a better argument would be, how about parental responsibilities? Like all these parents yelling at the school that never go, they're not even involved at the PTA level. They don't go to the parent-teacher conference. All of a sudden, they're upset about what they've been told their kids are learning, which they aren't. And now they're starting to want to take responsibility for the first time. Any thoughts on that fight that's playing out? Because I'm right in the middle of it.
I can't imagine. You're braver than I am. We have one nut job on our school board out here. I think it goes back to this kind of shame idea that people claim a right that stands above all other rights, and how dare you step on it, right? I have a right for my nose to be exposed to the air, and that stands above all other rights, and how dare you tell me to wear a mask? How dare you tell me what should be in the schools? This may be irrelevant, but it's just on my mind from this morning. R.A. Cohn, who I think you follow on Twitter as well, had a little drama in 4 acts today. He's in a dog park with his dog Humboldt, who I guess is a puppy and is big. And so a girl comes in alone to a dog park, and the dog, and she screeches at the dog, and the dog thinks, oh, that's the game, and the dog chases the girl. Bad things happen. And Ari says, you shouldn't be in this dog park unless you're with a dog or a parent. You should leave. Well, guess what happens? The other parents come in and Karen him and yell at him, how dare you tell my kid what to do? And he says, how dare you have your kid here? If you're going to be free range, take the responsibility, deal with it. Don't assume that the adult who's telling your kid what to do is stranger danger, malign, and malicious. I'm an adult telling your kid they shouldn't be here, getting scared of the dogs and scaring the dogs. And it strikes me as a tiny little, stupid little microcosm of people wanting to. They don't really care about what the kids are in the school. This is not a discussion in your school board about the kids. It's a discussion about the power of the parents, right? Purely. And it's all about power. And all of these discussions that we've had today about cancel culture and wokeness and all this crap is about people who've always been there, who weren't included in the conversation, who now have the means to be heard. And the old people who controlled the conversation resent that and want to keep them out. There's a Twitter thread I love that I respond to all the time. If you search for Regina Rini, spelled R-I-N-I, she's a Canadian academic. Here, another academic. I do hang out with him, who wrote about this in 2020 in a thread. I can send it to you, where she said that there's two sides to what's going on in this debate. The one side is people who, now that they're sitting at the table where norms are negotiated, they have the opportunity to say, you know, I wish you wouldn't say that, and here's why. Or I wish you'd let me tell you that you can use my pronoun, or whatever. And on the other side, you have the people who are angry that they're being criticized and told what to do by these interlopers, as far as they're concerned. Yeah. And she calls them the status quo warriors. I love that phrase, right? It's perfect. And I think what you could do is substitute Democrat and Republican with maybe progressive and status quo warrior. And what that side is trying to do is to say, don't mess with the power that I've had.
Yeah. So well said. Let me ask you about this issue this is an interesting issue between the editor of the New York Times and some of the journalists, I suppose, in the newsroom. I'm sure this is a nuanced debate, but about Twitter and how it's used. Help me understand the problem that he's trying to address, that journalists are trying to address with their usage of specifically Twitter as a tool.
So Dean Baquet, the executive editor of the New York Times, wrote a new policy on Twitter in which he said a few things. But primarily it was to be fair to it before I become unfair.
He wrote a new policy on how to use Twitter. It was an internal memo for New York Times employees,
which they knew would get out. And I think that there was a presumption that people should have a social media presence. And he said that's no longer required or expected, which is his way of saying you might want to get off Twitter. And part of this came out of the belief, in his view, that journalists were depending too much on Twitter. Well, that drives me batshit because it is Twitter that is enabling the people who for too long were unheard in mainstream mass media, including, if not especially, the New York Times. It is Twitter that gives them their own printing press, that gives them their own structure. It's what Meredith Clark and Andre Brock write about in Black Twitter. And it's not about trying to get attention to the New York Times. That's not, Andre Brock taught me that. That's not the point of Black Twitter. But it is a means by which journalists can find individuals. And what happens is, I think that the New York Times and others look at Twitter as if it's a monolith. Twitter says, Twitter went crazy about. There is no monolith, right? Twitter is a bunch of individuals.
Right.
And it is an opportunity for journalists and talk show hosts to find individuals who otherwise were not being heard in media and hear what they have to say and find the value in it and have a conversation. That's all it is. Now, the next argument is, well, Twitter is not representative of America. It's a bunch of journalists. A, that's not true. It's a lot of people. And B, it's a lot more representative of America than the New York Times subscriber list or certainly the New York Times newsroom. And so when the New York Times turns their back on Twitter, they are turning their back on the voices who were finally had a means to be heard. And I had this fit about a little over a year ago with Farhad Manjoo, who did a similar screed in the New York Times and said, didn't say Twitter journalists should get off Twitter, but as much as said that it's a cesspool and it's awful and it's terrible. Well, Farhad has a column. He has his platform, and now he's pulling the ladder up behind him. Megan McArdle, New Washington Post, a year ago, she wrote a column saying that companies should force their employees off of social media because it's just awful. I can't stand those people who have their platforms, who have their bully pulpits and their power, who now decide that no one else should be able to speak, but they should. That is the ultimate of canceling.
That's a great argument for both of those folks who have made those points in the past. And then finally, or maybe not, but the New York Times big article that I thought of you, I think I heard that it was even written and posted from you first on social media. I meant to reach out to you soon after, and I don't know what happened because I thought that was such a really important, big discussion and issue to have. But you had framed this very succinctly in your email to me as the New York Times versus speech. We're talking, of course, about the editorial board's piece from March 18th, posted March 18th at the New York Times, titled "America Has a Free Speech Problem." This one caused the great Jeff Jarvis great anguish, loss of sleep, and you really had to get and continue to have to get centered. And I'm glad that you're not, because there's lots to say about it.
No. Yeah, I was pissed off because what it was saying was that those who criticize others are causing a chill. And it starts off, it's just horrible. It says that we have a fundamental right for people to speak their minds and voice their opinions without fear of being shamed or shunned. To which the new columnist, Krissy Cottom, said, no, if you say something shameful, you should be shamed. There is no right to speak without consequence.
Right.
That's what drove everyone crazy about this editorial. And then they did some opinion polling. And I follow the great late professor of journalism at Columbia, James Carey, who's written that opinion polls are fundamentally corrupting of democracy because they preempt the conversation they're meant to measure. And they bring, of course, the bias of the pollster. And I've never seen a clearer example of that than in this editorial, where they did their own poll. And they asked questions like, over the past year, have you held your tongue because you were concerned about retaliation or harsh criticism? Well, you're a comedian. I bet, yeah, even you've done that.
I mean, I'm laughing because it's all I do. And by the way, it's not nearly good enough already with anyone who knows me. I need to be much better. Anyway, go ahead.
Another one. How much of a problem is it? Okay, right there, that frames it as if, I guess it's going to be a problem. How much of a problem is it that some Americans do not exercise their freedom of speech in everyday situations out of fear of retaliation or harsh criticism?
Mm-hmm.
Well, right there is a rationalization marketplace at work where you feel put upon, you feel like you're going to get criticized for saying things that you used to be able to say because people are now setting new norms and you don't know what to do about it. And boy, are you shamed and hurt and you wish that weren't the case, right? And the New York Times people say, yeah. So this editorial drove me batshit.
What about?
But as ever, the Wall Street Journal outdid them. Can I mention one last thing?
I mean, yeah, please go. I didn't know about this. What did they?
Peggy Noonan.
Yeah. Oh, right. I did. Yes, Peggy Noonan's piece.
Never a surprise. Peggy Noonan went one beyond the New York Times. And she went to some conference that was held under Chatham House rule, which means we don't know who she talked to. Which is not a great thing for an open democracy, I think, itself. But anyway, in which she concluded that the internet is a terrible thing. And her solution to this was to ban people under the age of 18 from YouTube and the internet. Get off my yard, Peggy.
I don't know. I mean, it's a hypothetical. It's not even a hypothetical. How would you do such a thing?
It's stupid. It's just stupid.
That's like saying ban families with small children from bringing a screen to the restaurant to distract their kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you can't. Yeah, it's not going to work either.
Right. And so it's a lot of people. The funny thing about this is that it's so paradoxical because it's people messing with other people. And what they're messing with is saying, you're messing with me. And it becomes a hall of mirrors and you can't tell who's messing with who.
Yeah.
Right. But the essence of it is that we now have this magnificent device for speech, greater than Gutenberg's, greater than all time. I celebrate that. Along with it comes assholes, idiots, and so on. And you're going to hear things you didn't want to hear. Well, that's okay. That's how you decide and learn. That's how you challenge yourself. And now the fear that I have is people are going to use this cancel culture bullshit to regulate the internet and regulate speech worse than even they anticipate. Right. That's the paradox of this. Oh, I want my free speech, but I don't want your free speech. Right. So I want speech to be regulated so you can't say what you say, so I can keep saying what I say, so you don't criticize me for saying it.
Yeah, it always comes back to a kind of personal autocracy, I'm seeing this more and more, just obviously playing out with a certain archetype of person that they have to be in full power about everything.
That's brilliant, Pete. Personal autocracy. I have not heard that before. Well, so is that why? But is that an explanation for the appeal of Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think so. That's the way that I see it. That's how I see it with, I've been reading, obviously, for years, Tim Snyder, more recently, Ruth Ben-Ghiat. My friend Kenneth C. Davis wrote about authoritarians, and a lot of them have, I'm not going to say there's any shortage of history to write about, but a lot of them have gone into the psychology of it all. And then we've seen this here in our own country, and it's just this experiment that you see played out when you end up talking to someone who supports Donald Trump. They're either they want to be subservient to someone in a way and have some,
or they want him to be a model of or they I can't be in full power. Yes. I admire that person because they are.
Yes, and it's
right.
I understand the impulse of wanting to be in charge. I get it. I can be that way in every sector of my life. I want to be right. And the question is, would you rather be happy or right if you're talking about your marriage or personal relationships? But I get it. I get the impulse. But my more intelligent or mature impulse is I want it to be right. So I don't care how, if I'm in charge of putting the table together, I just want the table to go together. So I'm happy to work with anybody who knows more about table construction. Fine, let's do it. Let's go.
Right.
It's that simple on big issues to me. And I don't think I should be in full charge or power of anything, frankly. And so I'm not. It doesn't appeal to me to have to support someone who would. How about last question for you? Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson has now been confirmed Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. A lot of great celebration and feelings around that. And I've collected many of them and shared them with my audience. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on how that went. I know you've paid close attention to that, and we do obviously talk about politics. And I just want to, how hadn't talked to you about the confirmation hearings, and your Tom Cottons, who have said that she would be the kind of person who would have defended Nazis or called her a pedophile. Your Josh Hawley's, your Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham's, and Marsha Blackburn, who wants to build a bridge, or rather a wall on the border between Tennessee and Alabama. Is that right? Anyway, what do you think of the way that they treated her?
There's no more Overton window. It's a big giant garage door that got blasted open.
Yeah,
right? The entire side of the building of rational discussion is gone.
Yeah,
and media don't know how to deal with it, and so they quote it as if it's another side in a debate, and it's terrible. It was a beautiful day to see her get elected to become the Honorable Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, and nothing can take away that joy, as Cory Booker said.
Yeah.
But good Lord, what terrible, terrible behavior. What an awful court.
But boy, did they try.
A destroyed institution it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I have such sympathy for her having to sit next to now, especially in one case, a real blithering, drunken, beer-sodden idiot. And she has to go to work with him for decades. And has to listen to him.
I did not know Clarence Thomas was a drinker. Oh, you met Brett Kavanaugh. I was confused with which.
So,
yeah.
I really thought I had some sympathy for her, thinking, what a workplace to have to go to.
Yeah.
Right?
She's just so much more intellectual experience and credible than certainly any of the conservatives on the court. It's just...
5 miles. But the court itself was a destroyed institution.
Yeah.
I know that you are his greatest fan, as am I. Elie Mystal's book is brilliant.
Yeah.
And by the way, to anyone out there listening, don't read it, listen to it. Buy the audio version.
Does he get emotional and passionate?
He's full Elie. It's amazing. The audiobook is the way to consume it. I'm trying to convince my provost that we should assign it to every student at the school. And of course it's over the top. It's Elie. But he creates such a good case for the structural racism of the institution of the Constitution, the institution of the Supreme Court, and other things, and solutions to how to fix it as best as we can. And whether we can or not ever, Elie recognizes a centuries-long struggle. But it's a brilliant book, and it sets a context for her election to the court, her appointment to the court, because it shows the Sisyphusian hill that she's got to climb now.
You should hear my conversation with him. I was thinking about you while I was having it, because I basically, when he came on last to promote and talk about the book, I spent the first maybe third of it talking about why he doesn't have his own TV show.
Yeah, why not?
And it's still what you would think. It's that he's too over the top, too hyperbolic or something, and executives don't want to take credit for his statements, I guess. They don't want to be...
He's also just not on the air enough.
Yeah, well, that goes without saying. Just real quick, Elon Musk and Twitter, what's your rant on that?
Sigh. Grow up, Elon. I worry for Twitter's sake, because if he had been on the board, he would have, I think, caused damage there with his harebrained ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I fear more now that he's unrestrained and he could buy Twitter. And he could do to Twitter what Peter Thiel did to Gawker in different ways. And I think Jack Dorsey, obviously he did this, he tweeted this knowing what was going on behind the scenes before it became public. He took responsibility for the problems of centralization on the internet. And so Dorsey has created an initiative he called Blue Sky, which stays at Twitter, but it's his own thing now, in which and I mentioned this before, in which the speech layer of the internet is a commodity. And it's distributed and it's open and everybody can speak wherever they want to speak. But then what we need, back to my belief that you, Pete, you are the representation of the future of the internet. Then on top of that is the talk show host producer that you want, who goes and finds the internet you want, who finds the smart people, the informed people, the authoritative people, the artful people, the interesting people, the relevant people, and brings them to you. And I think that it brings them to you from anywhere, from a blog, from a podcast, from a Substack, from a Twitter, from wherever. Recognize that speech is now a commodity. Hallelujah. Anybody who's connected can speak. But we don't want the platforms and algorithms to be the ones amplifying that speech. What we want is you, Pete.
Well, I'll take the job. I'm up for it. That would be one thing I'd actually be decently qualified for. I found you. And I am very happy I did, and I appreciate you joining me to talk about all these issues. We always love when Jeff Jarvis is here, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you very much, sir.
Always a pleasure, sir.
How about it? Yeah, Jeff Jarvis and Wajahat Ali. Go on Twitter right now and thank both of them for joining me here on the show. Thank you to Pete Coe. Thank you to John Carroll for the new bumper music and, of course, the theme song. DJ Monzak for the logo and, of course, the website. Check him out if anybody wants to hire somebody. And I hope to see you tomorrow night at the Stand Up Happy Hour Hangout. Thanks for listening to today's show, supporting the show with a subscription to it. It's free, but it ain't cheap. But it's a lot of work. So please sign up now. Welcome to all the new subscribers. I really appreciate it. Can't do it without you. Now go be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you very much, and tell me how you're doing that too. Bye-bye. Talk to you tomorrow.
You better stand up, stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to try. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.